Welcome back to Art and Soul. If you're returning, welcome back. Good to have you. So today's project is going to be centered on worthiness. We're going to explore this concept a little bit through art and see if we can have some fun, make a nice big mess. The main materials that we're going to be using today for a very mixed media project are going to be some small tactile items. I have marbles and a few other things that I may or may not use. I'm just gonna feel that out. And then I have a variety of acrylic paints here. And of course we got some like fun shiny ones too. So those are gonna be the main items that we're gonna use for this. You can also add in other inks and pigments and things like that if you're feeling that kind of vibe. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the start of this project. If anybody is wondering, I'm using a small 8x10 canvas. You should have plenty of room to play around on this. I also forgot to mention before, I do have a hot glue gun happening over here to make sure that we're able to put all these fun little marbles onto our canvas. This project today is going to be pretty messy, so just be aware, as always, of what you're wearing. And the surfaces that you're working on. Honestly, one of my favorite surfaces for any kind of art projects, I like glass top tables. Easy to clean, and even if you have to take a paint scraper to it, it's not going to cause that much damage. So make sure you've got your water. Make sure if you need to that you've got paintbrushes, things like that. And we're going to go ahead and get started here. The first thing we're going to do is use a little bit of symbolism in this project today. So when we talk about worthiness as a concept, okay, a lot of the things that can impact worthiness, which for me I feel is always the root that you come back to anytime you do any growth, any self-discovery, for anybody in therapy, a lot of times what we end up unearthing is blockages to our sense of worthiness. The other language for this is, self-esteem, confidence, sometimes self-efficacy, but really this is a sense of worthiness that we're talking about. So we get a lot of messages from other people. Sometimes we get messages from ourselves as well, where our sense of worthiness tends to get caught. Okay, so if we look at everything in our life as kind of this beautiful flow of energy, anytime we have something that disrupts that flow and is kind of pulling us away from our sense of worth, that flow changes, and usually not in ways that are good for us. Okay, so if we think of this in terms of maybe something like self-image, okay, this can be, I don't look the way that I want to look, whatever that may be, because it's different for everyone. That's something that's going to block what's happening here, okay? Something else could be, I'm not performing as well as I should, and whatever that may be. So now we have another block happening here. That can be in sports, it can be in school, can be at a job, new job, even a career that you might have been in for quite some time. Things change, and sometimes as we're adjusting to those changes, we feel like we kind of drop off or we get a little bit separated from ourselves. So when that happens, we start sending ourselves these messages, and what makes them more painful is when we do experience those messages echoed back to us from the outside world, whether that's people in school, people in workplaces. Hear that kind of negative message echoed back to us, it just makes it harder. It ingrains it that much more. Another message that you could be sending yourself might be that I'm not as good in relationships as I should be. It could be any kind of relationship. Friendships can be extremely challenging and painful. Romantic relationships too. One of the things that people don't talk about, especially if it's a long-term relationship and you've gotten to know a family of whoever your partner is, you also sometimes grieve those people too. And it's a disenfranchised grief. And you can actually miss those people just as much or for longer than you might actually miss that partner. Depends on the situation. So that's something else that can come up. Messages of unworthiness can come into play with of self-image. So if you don't have the finances that you want, now we can have another challenge here. That can also set people back in their sense of self-confidence. It can limit your peer group if you don't feel like financially you can keep up with all of the outings and things like that. There are all these different things that impact us. Okay, so whatever these are for you, fill them in your head as I put more of these on the canvas. Before I pause and go glue these down, that's what we're going to be using our glue gun for in just a second. Before we get into all of that, what I really want you to be thinking about as you're working through this project is that worthiness is not something that you can earn. Worthiness is a realization that you already are. And we are back. All I've done in the meantime was glue each of these marbles onto our canvas. So like I said, I use hot glue. It's pretty quick. You're not going to have to wait more than maybe 2 minutes for this to be ready to go. So for the sake of this project, I want to write out a few of the things that we mentioned before that play into unworthiness. Okay? Each person's are going to be different. You don't have to do this part of a project. If you do, maybe for fun, pick an ink that is a nice pretty color, but something that might run a little bit. We kind of want this nice drippy look to this. Okay? So might want to start out with maybe the feeling of impostor syndrome. Might also want to talk about unlovable. That's something that you experience, and a lot of times with feeling unworthy, that's one of the first things that comes to mind, and it can be hard to admit to yourself. You can also talk about body image. Also talk about a sense of maybe incompetence. This happens a lot when we're starting something new. Also happen if there's been an area of life that has been a challenge for a long time. Maybe certain social situations, things like that maybe you've had a really hard time navigating for a really long time. And then obviously we're going to include an overall sense of unworthiness. We find ourselves in relationships and all kinds of situations, maybe trying to hide or mask certain parts of ourselves if we don't think we're going to have approval for those. This also gets into the idea of disowning parts of yourself. So this is kind of a way to think about separating parts of yourself and abandoning parts of yourself that you don't love because you think they make you unlovable. I'm skipping back for a second. I found a wax that'll actually work a little bit better for us. You don't have to do this in any particular pattern or anything like that. A little bit more texture if you want it. And this is also something, if you like the visual look of it, you can add more again at the end later. You could also take the back end of a brush and drag through this wax while it's still hot if you want to make like little lines and streaks and things like that too. I may do that for a few of these and make some bigger pools of wax. It doesn't have to look beautiful. This is just something that we're experimenting with. We're having fun and maybe even learning something about ourselves in the process. Okay, so this is where we're going to pick up with going ahead and putting our canvas, propping it up. What I will actually use, because I'm not too worried about it, I'm going to use my little wax stick down here to hold this in place. This wax that's still warm to the touch, but it'll melt to the table and it'll help hold my canvas in place. Now we're going to take our paints. You can choose any color that you want. I'm actually going to use multiples, and I would recommend that for this type of project so that you've got a lot of different texture and things like that going on. We're going to start just dripping paint at the very top in all different places. Okay, what we're talking about with this is that flow of energy. Okay, all the different things going on in your life, maybe the things that you are aspiring toward and what you want. And what we're looking for is the way that all of these marbles, all of these things that we believe about ourselves, how are they blocking the flow? How are they maybe stopping us from getting the things that we want in life, or being able to appreciate what we already have? So an example for that might be, we know that we already have friends and family who love us, and maybe they tell us that all the time, but it's hard for us to accept it and really believe it. So maybe it's not that the love isn't there, maybe it's that we're having a hard time accepting it. And if you have paints that are a little bit older, like some of these, and thicker, that's okay, because we're going to be adding water to this as we go and thinning things down. And this is the kind of project that you just be patient with. There's not a whole lot of effort required from you. And maybe that's a lesson on worthiness. It's not something that you can chase after. It's not something you can earn. It's not something you can accomplish. It's just looking at yourself and being maybe a little bit more honest about the value that you already possess, and sitting with it long enough to see it come to the surface. Watching these paints all flow together, these can be hopes, dreams, aspirations through our lives we're trying to invite in. And all of these blockages, the impostor syndrome, the body image, that sense of being unlovable or unworthy, these are all the things that it catches on. It doesn't mean that you're not just as beautiful. It means is that the process of getting where you want to go is just harder than it needs to be. All of these points where this is held up, those are all opportunities for us to learn something about ourselves. So what we can also do, if you want, you can add water to this. You don't have to. You could also do this in layers. But I'm going to take a paper towel and just dip this in water. Just a few drops here and there. Since we're using acrylic, the paint's thick enough that it's not going to just run completely, but you will have some of that. And like I said, yes, this is going to be a messy project, so you're going to have a nice little puddle of colors at the bottom, and that's okay. You were warned. But what we're looking at here is all of the effort and energy that it takes to flow around all of these obstacles, around all of these beliefs about yourself. And how much more peaceful would your life be if those weren't there? How much of the suffering is self-imposed? Plenty of outside sources and reasons for things like this to collect and gather in the way of our path. But there's also quite a bit that you can do about it. And this is where our idea of confidence and self-efficacy and things like that come from. is realizing that there's actually quite a bit about our lives that we have a high degree of influence over. And you are the only person that you're going to be with forever. So work on your relationship with yourself. How beautiful would it be to feel worthy and to feel loved at all times? Because it's a gift that you gave to yourself.